Oh, hi.
Welcome
I
to
didn't see you
reality.
come in. You got it? Sorry, I tried to get that out of the way.
There's the two old dudes sitting on the same side fighting for space. Yeah.
I only see one of them.
One old dude. Yeah. Welcome to reality. Glad you guys are with us tonight as we come to talk about Samuel. Still in the book of Samuel.
Samuel?
Yeah.
Yep. And we'll be here until Jesus returns.
But we've got a great treat for you guys in July. Do you want to tell us?
Yeah. For the month of July, we're going to have some guest speakers. And they're all young ladies, women that will be speaking to us. And some of them you will know, and some of them you won't. But all of them are blessed teachers, and I'm excited for you to hear them. Two of them that you will know and be blessed by is Penny and Joyce. So then we'll have two other young ladies who will come and join. That will cover all the Wednesdays in July, and so that's just what we're going to call it, Women's Month or something. I don't know what we'll call it. But anyway, we'll have that for the month of July. Now, also, I need to tell you, for the month of July, we are not going to Zoom. So it'll just be worship and a teaching, and that will be it for the month of July. But we're really looking forward to getting to share the gifts and graces that these women have with our community. So plan for it now. Starting in the month of July, we'll have 4 guest speakers. They are going to be incredible, and you don't want to miss it. So,
Amen. Great.
is that good?
That's good, man.
I did good.
You're really good. All right, let's praise God together today. Rise Father, do help us know that you're dear God. I don't know how well we remember what this time last year was like. But Lord, you've grown us so much, Father. And you have been present with us through so much, God. Help us to trust in you more and more every day, Lord. Help us know you are near. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Really good, guys. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, super good. Let me get my stuff together here and then we'll get with it. Again, I just want to say thank you for joining with us again on Wednesday nights for our teaching time and our worship time. I am looking forward to the day when we can be back in person and you guys can hear these people singing and playing their guitars live. It's just so rich and so wonderful. So anyway, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you being a part of this. Again, I just want to reiterate that the next month we will have some guest speakers. The women will be speaking, and I'm just so thrilled for this to be happening. So I hope you make plans to watch and be a part of that. We're in chapter 19 in 1 Samuel, the book of 1 Samuel. Your TV is not moving. Kayla is fixing it so that it sees me really good. So just know that there was not an earthquake in Lubbock. She is troubleshooting, and she's doing a great job too. Okay. We're going to finish chapter 19. We did the first 10 verses. We're going to go through 11 through 24 to finish up the chapter. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what I think the chapter is about. And if you want to quit after I tell you this, then that's okay. But I'm going to go ahead and teach on the topic. This chapter seems to be pointing out something about God's deliverance. And 3 times in this chapter, David is delivered. He's delivered from Saul by Jonathan. He's delivered from Saul by Micah, his wife, Michal, sorry. And then he's delivered by Samuel and the prophets. And so there's something about in this chapter about how God rescues us. And here's the point that my teaching is going to try to get to. That God's deliverance is not so much about extraction as it is about empowerment. God's rescue, his deliverance, is not so much about extracting you out of your circumstances, but empowering you in them. So, here we are at verse 11, chapter 19, verse 11. Just a little bit of a background. Saul has made his 3rd attempt to kill David. This is done after Jonathan advocated for David, and Saul promised to God not to kill him. Now, in this 3rd attempt, some suggest that this 3rd attempt was much more severe and much more threatening. In verse 10, the description hints at Saul not hurling a spear at David, but trying to shove a spear into him. That's much more accurate, and it's much more personal. Whatever happened, though, David is able to escape, and he runs for it. And he will be on the run from Saul for some years to come now, starting now. One scholar suggests that David was a fugitive for 7 years. Now, some suggest even longer. But can you imagine looking over your shoulder and never staying in one place for very long, for a long period of time, 7 years, just using that as a frame of reference. One commentary said that David lived in approximately 16 different places in the 7 years that he was on the run. I can't imagine. David is now a fugitive. So now we're ready for verses 11 through 24. If you'll join with me, and I'm reading from the New American Standard Version. Then Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him in order to put him to death in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, and by the way, this is the only time she's given this label. Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, "If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you'll be put to death." So Michal let David down through a window, and he went out and fled and escaped. Michal took the household idol and laid it on the bed and put a quilt of goat's hair at its head and covered it with clothes. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, in other words, the men have entered the house now, "He is sick." Then Saul sent messengers to see David, saying, "Bring him up to me on his bed, that I may put him to death." And when the messengers entered, behold, the household idol was on the bed with a quilt of goat's hair at its head. So Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me like this, and let my enemy go, so that he has escaped?" And by the way, just to make an emphasis, let my enemy go. How in the world has David been an enemy to Saul? The view of David being an enemy is not what David has done, but it's about how Saul's inner world has come to see him. And often that is really true, beloved. Often those who we view as an enemy is really more because of the way we have come to view them than what they have done to us. "Why have you deceived me like this, and let my enemy go, so that he has escaped?" And Michal said to Saul, "He said to me," talking about David, "Let me go. Why should I put you to death?" In other words, if you don't let me go, I'll kill you, is what she's saying. Verse 18. Now David fled and escaped and came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and stayed in Naoth, which is, by the way, Naoth is a school or a camp somewhere within the vicinity of Ramah. It was a school of prophets or a camp for prophets. And so this is where they go, just outside the city, outside the village. Verse 19, it was told Saul, saying, "Behold, David is at Naoth in Ramah." And then Saul sent messengers to take David. But when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, with Samuel standing and presiding over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. When it was told Saul, he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. And so Saul sent messengers again, the third time, and they also prophesied. Then he himself went to Ramah and came as far as the large well that is in Sukkah. And he asked and said, "Where are Samuel and David?" And someone said, "Behold, they are at Naoth in Ramah." He proceeded to Naoth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also, so that he went along prophesying continually until he came to Naoth in Ramah. Notice he didn't even get to Naoth before the Spirit of God encountered him. And this is the last verse. He also stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. And therefore they say, "Is Saul among the prophets?" Now that we've heard that question before. It was a question of amazement. Is Saul among the prophets? Now I think it's a question of sarcasm. Is Saul among the prophets? Okay. So there's our verses for tonight. The first place David runs after this third attempt that Saul tries to kill him as he runs to his home. This is where his wife is, Michael's. This is Saul's daughter. Maybe he thought that she could get her dad to come to his senses. Maybe he thought that surely Saul wouldn't come to his home. We don't know. But Saul sends assassins to the house. Now listen to what Michael says to David in verse 11. Then Saul sent messengers, that's the assassins, to David's house to watch him in order to put him to death in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be put to death. Okay, now, first of all, she doesn't see talking to her dad as an option. You notice that? That isn't even a part of her perspective. And notice also that she does not tell David what he is supposed to do. She simply says, out what she sees. This is what she sees, and so she's telling him her observation. Now, I don't want to make too much of a deal because there's other things that I want to get to, but this is something to notice. Really, Michal is a royal. Royals are used to telling people what to do. But here, instead of telling David what to do, she offers a recommendation instead. And I think this is done out of respect for him. Even though it's a crisis situation, it's very stressed, very life-threatening. This is sort of a great snapshot of how spouses need to talk with each other, especially during stressful times. In other words, it's not telling each other what to do. It's just sharing what you're observing and letting them make their own decision. I think this is something that needs to be taken note of. So here he goes to his home, and here his wife is now talking to him. But now what is David doing at his home? Well, I want you to notice something. If you'll stay right here in chapter 19, keep your finger there, but flip over to Psalm 59. Psalm 59. Now, Psalm 59, you'll notice there is sort of a parenthesis before it gets started, and it has these words. It says, for the choir director, set to, and then that's a musical term. And then it says a miktam of David. Now, there's all kinds of struggles trying to understand the miktam of David. But read the rest. When Saul sent men and they watched the house in order to kill him. Okay, now so what's being recorded here in Psalm 59 is what David prayed. Now, it is written to a song, and it does use the word sing, verse 16. But as for me, I shall sing of your strength. Yes, I shall joyfully sing of your loving kindness in the morning. But I think it's more a prayer. And so what was David doing while he was at his house? He was praying. Now listen to these words. I'm going to read the first part and the last part. Verse 1 and 2. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Set me securely on high, away from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who do iniquity, and save me from men of bloodshed. Now skip to the last two verses. But as for me, I shall sing of your strength. What? When someone's trying to kill you? Yes, I shall joyfully sing of your loving kindness in the morning. When were they going to kill him? In the morning. For you have been my stronghold and a refuge in the day of my distress. O my strength, that's what he calls God. O my strength, I will sing praises to you. For God is my stronghold, the God who shows me loving kindness. What is David doing? He's focusing on God. He's making God not just one thing in his life, he's making God his only thing in life. In a time that either God comes through or life is ended. So, this is what's going on in this house. Somehow or another, they recognize that assassins are outside, and so Michal is telling him to escape, and David is seeking the Lord. Now, evidently, this house that they're in has a second or third story window. It's a window high enough where David he can't jump out of it and be okay. And for some reason, the assassins are not watching this window, but Michal lets David down through this window, and then he is able to flee and escape. The writer doesn't tell us why the assassins are not watching the window, and he doesn't tell us, did David and Michal tie sheets together, and that's how they lured him down, or does Michal keep rope as a household product, and they just where they could lower him out? We are just told that she helps him, and I think part of what the writer wants us to see is that, like her brother Jonathan, who advocated with Saul for David, the help they give to David, both her and Jonathan, is somewhat unexpected, really. Now, you might argue that, well, doesn't a wife want to help her husband? Well, that's true, okay? But in this situation, it's not the norm. It's not how help usually comes in these kinds of situations. The crown prince, Jonathan, the one who is in line for the throne, is helping his replacement. That's not normal. And a royal daughter betraying her father, who is the king, and both risking their life to do so, because you see, it's no secret that the king wants David dead. This is even a little more startling, especially with Michal, when you get a peek at Michal's character. She doesn't have the best of character, but she chooses to be one of those agents that helps David, that God can use to help David. And the idea here is that often when God is giving his deliverance, it comes from sources that are unexpected, that we couldn't come up with on our own. Now, in the story with Michal, in verse 13, we're told that she takes the household idol. Now wait, hold up. Why in the world is there a life-size or somewhat life-size idol? What's that doing in David's house? Now here's just a couple of thoughts to think about. One, back in chapter 18, verse 21, Saul tells us that he's giving Michal to David to be his wife, so that she could be some kind of snare or trap to David. Now, what is he talking about? Well, it could be that Michal practiced idol worship. It could be that. That was still a part of what was going on in the land that Samuel, the prophet Samuel, was trying to eradicate out of Israel. It's possible because we don't see any indication from Michal of any kind of serious commitment to Yahweh or Yahweh's ways. He seems to be someone she knows about, but he doesn't seem to be one that she's following or giving her life to. If David could be distracted from God, now this might have been Saul's thoughts. If David could be distracted from God, then the Spirit of God might leave him and he will stop having success, especially in battle. In other words, he'll lose battles and maybe die. So that could be what's going on here, is that we're being told that Michal practiced idol worship. I don't know, though. I'm not sure. Scholars go back and forth on this, by the way. But notice something else. Michal takes the idol and puts it in their bed and dresses it up to appear to be David. Now, please, beloved, don't let the irony, don't miss the irony here. If this is an idol, she is using a fake god to fake out the assassins. Now, that's ironic. She's using a fake God to fake out David's killers. By the way, that's what idols are anyway, any idol. And we still have them today. The thing that you think about the most, the thing that you value the most, the answers to those thoughts are things that are getting close to being idols. And idols are fake gods. And they will fake you out every time. They promise things that they can never deliver. So don't let that irony miss you here. Now, more likely, my guess is this was sort of a household statue, really. It doesn't seem like she's treating it like you would an idol. An idol was something sacred, something that you gave worship to. She doesn't seem to be showing any respect for this thing because she treats it like a piece of furniture. And she takes a goat hair pillow, stuffs it around, or a blanket around its head, and covers it up like it's David in the bed. And when the assassins enter the house, what she does is she lies. Now, we're not, the writer doesn't evaluate anything about the fact that she lies. But we're going to see this come back, and it not be, we're beginning to get a picture that maybe her character has some flaws to it. But she lies. She says he is sick. And so the men go back to Saul and report this. But Saul isn't satisfied. He demands that they go back to the house and bring David to him on his sick bed so he can kill David himself. And so the men return to David's house, then to realize that it was all a ruse. It was all a deception. So then Saul and his daughter have a face-to-face conversation. I don't know if it was at the house or whether the men brought her back to the palace where Saul is at. In verse 17, this is that conversation. So Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me like this and let my enemy go so that he has escaped?" And Michal said to Saul, "He," meaning David, "said to me," meaning Michal, "Let me go. Why should I put you to death?" In other words, if you don't let me go, I'm going to kill you. Okay. She lies again. But this time she throws David under the bus. That's what she does. She lies to save her own skin. And by the way, that's a family behavior in this family. She lies to save her own skin just like her father has done. This is a peek at her character. But it's also a peek at what all God can use to accomplish the plans he has for each of our lives. In other words, it's almost like, I don't want to go too far here. I want to be real careful that I don't walk off the cliff. But it's almost like God can use anything to bring his purposes about. It's almost like God can use anything to accomplish his plans for your life. And I really think that this is an undertone theme, something that's running through this chapter that we need to really capture for ourselves in this day and time. In order to accomplish what God desires in our lives, he has options available that we could not brainstorm about for 1,000 years. He has so many options. One of our biggest problems, beloved, in this life is that we put limits on God. Scott Latham often worships a God that is too small and too limited. Now, I'm not encouraging us to get unrealistic and crazy with this, but I am saying it might do us some good to evaluate the limits and parameters that we have placed on our God. Now, go with me to the last section of the chapter. This again will illustrate this idea that God has options that we can't even imagine. There's just no way that we can come up with all the things that are available to God to use to accomplish what he wants to accomplish in our lives. I can remember, I've shared with you before that there was a season where Diane and I felt like that the Lord was asking us to depend on Him for everything. I mean, just everything. So what happened tangibly was that neither one of us were gainfully employed, and we just asked the Lord, sought the Lord every day for the things that we need. Now, sometimes that would, like someone would call and say, hey, Scott, I need you to help me lay some linoleum in my kitchen, and I'll pay you. So I'd go do that, Sometimes it would be someone says, hey, we need some help in our kitchen. Would you be a dishwasher for us for us? So I'd go do that, or sometimes it would just be like, I can remember once we were sitting at the supper table and there was no food in the house. All of us are sitting at the table, and Diana says, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know. And the phone rang, and I picked it up. And it was this young lady that we had walked with, her and her husband, for some things, and working through some things. And they were moving. And she called me and she said, hey, Scott, we're just about to get everything packed, but we forgot to unload the refrigerator. So we put it all in boxes. Could you use some food? So I thought, oh, well, I said, yeah, I think we could use it. So in about 15 minutes, there were boxes of food at our door, and we were able to have a meal together. It's things like that. It's like, who would have ever thought of that option? I can remember once that a lady called me and she said, you've been recommended to me as a counselor. I just need one session. I just need to talk about some transitions that my husband and I are going through. So I met with her, and we had a real good conversation. God blessed it. And then she said, well, how much do I owe you? And I said, well, the way I do this is I just ask you to consider what God would want you to do, and then that you do that. So she thought for a minute. She said, we're moving to another city, and my husband and I haven't tithed to anything, so I think I'll just give you my tithe. And I'm thinking $100, $200, that kind of thing. Now, at the time, Diane and I hadn't been able to pay our mortgage for 3 months. We owed $3,000 on the mortgage, and we had gotten our first foreclosure letter. So anyway, I just said, whatever you feel like God would want you to do, then do that. She writes me a check, she folds it, hands it to me, and she leaves, and I lock the door behind her because I'm going to be leaving out a different door. And then when I get back to the office, I open the check, and the check is for $3,000. I fell to my knees. God has options we can't even imagine, beloved. Our problem is that we limit Him. We put parameters on Him. We make our God too small. Okay, look at the last part, the last section, 18 through 24. Yeah, now, what happens in this last section, David runs to Samuel, and he escapes from Saul from the palace. He then escapes from his house, and now he runs to Samuel in Ramah, because that's Samuel's hometown. Now, in Ramah, there is this school of prophets, and the name of it's either a camp or a school, and it's called Naoth, and Samuel is in charge of it. It's a school that's dedicated to prophets. Now, we don't know if this school was to educate prophets or for prophets to come there to educate the people. We don't know which one. Maybe it was both. But this school at Naoth existed. And now David runs to Samuel at Ramah, and they go out to this place that's within the village limit, somewhere close to the village. Saul finds out that David is there. That's where he knew that David escaped. Then he finds out that now he's with Samuel. So he sends kidnappers to take David hostage. Look at verse 20. Then Saul sent messengers, this is the kidnappers, to take David. But when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, with Samuel standing and presiding over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. Saul sends another. He sends this first group, and what happens is that they. What I think is happening is they are somehow subdued by the Spirit of God. Somehow the Spirit of God overtakes them, and they began to participate in the prophesying. Well, Saul hears about that, so he sends another group of kidnappers, and the same thing happens. And so then when he hears about it, he sends a third group, and the same thing happens to them. 3 times and the same results. This is the old adage, Saul's operating by the old adage, if at first you don't succeed, try again. That's where he's at. But after the 3rd time and it doesn't work, Saul changes his motto. It goes from at first you don't succeed, try again, to this. If you want to get something done right, do it yourself. And so Saul goes. And what happens in verse 23 is that Saul, before he even gets to Ramah and Naoth, the Spirit of God takes him over. And he too begins to prophesy. Now notice in verse 24 it says, my version, New American Standard, he also stripped off his clothes. Now let me say that doesn't mean he's naked. It just means he's taken off his outer garments and he laid down. In other words, he's laying in the dirt. Now the word says naked. That probably wouldn't, in a Jewish culture, that probably wouldn't happen. But it just means that his outer garments are gone. He's basically laying there in his underwear. Okay? And he did that all day and all night. And now, he also, that means that all the messengers that had come to kidnap David are also laying in the dirt in their underwear. And he too prophesied, because the Spirit comes on the kidnappers and they start prophesying. So Saul does too. Okay, so that's the picture of what's going on here. Oh my gosh, what kind of options does God have? People in their underwear in the dirt? That's an option? Really? Oh my gosh. Now my best explanation is, what the heck is going on here? That's really what we want to know. But my best explanation is, as to what is going on, is that there is like an on-fire prayer meeting going on here. It's going on at this school. The Spirit of God is visiting the people at the school, as well as anyone else who happens to enter the school's location. And so the Spirit of God takes them over. And so they began to prophesy. Now this word prophesy here, the word there is really a suitcase word, because it carries several different kinds of meanings, several different kinds of ideas. It's simply this: prophesying is a word from God spoken to humans for encouragement to other humans. Okay? Now encouragement can be something, do you need to do this? Or it can be, you need to not do that. And, encouragement can have very different shades to it. But prophesying simply, just in its simple form, it's a word from God spoken to humans for other humans. Okay? But prophesying can come in many forms. That definition of prophesying can take many different shapes. Prophesying can be praise. Prophesying can be prayer. Prophesying can be preaching. Prophesying can be counseling. Here, there seems to be a very powerful, prophetic prayer time going on where God is speaking encouragement to His people, and so powerful that the power of it just takes you over. It subdues you. It stops you in your tracks and becomes, the word that He is speaking to His people becomes your only thing. I don't know if you've ever been a part of something like that. I could tell you a few personal examples of times that I've been involved in something like that, where literally the only way to describe what's taking place is that God is taken over in these moments and in this place. Let me share with you a story that I know. And if you want to read about this story, there's a little book called One Divine Moment, written by Robert Coleman. It's just a little bitty book, but it describes the 1970 revival that took place at Asbury College. In February of 1970, what was happening is that they were having a chapel at the college, and the person who was supposed to speak was the dean. But the dean kept feeling like he was supposed to open, instead of speaking, he was supposed to open the mic up for testimony. And so pretty soon, people started coming. There was, pause and silence for a little bit, and a student got up and shared their testimony. Another student got up. Pretty soon there was a long line. Pretty soon it was like everybody wanted to share testimony, and people were weeping, people were praising God, people were singing, it's just like something began to take over the meeting. Even faculty was sharing their testimony, was praying with students, praying with each other. It was just like, so there was confession of sin, there was repentance, there was just something was happening. But they went on and on. In fact, they canceled classes that day. It went into the night. It went all night long. It went for a whole week. They canceled classes and everything for a whole week. And people began to hear about this, and people were coming to the campus to see this phenomena. And they tell stories of people crossing the street to the campus, getting to the curb, and stepping up onto the sidewalk, and then suddenly feeling the need to get on their knees. There were sidewalks where there were just shoes people had left because they felt like the ground was so holy that they had to take their shoes off. There were people who were lying just flat on their face outside the chapel, overwhelmed by God's presence and power. People weeping and crying because they had never felt that powerful of a love before in their life. They had never sensed God's presence that clearly and that strongly. And this went on for 144 hours, uninterrupted. Now, after that week, they sent out something like 2,000 teams to other churches and other campuses to witness to what God had been doing. And months at end, there were just all kinds of revivals breaking out from that one that happened on that campus. That's kind of my picture of what's happened here. The Holy Spirit took over the normal course of affairs, and every bit of attention and energy was directed to Him. Now, during that February and onward of 1970, there was just more and more ramifications from what happened. That God visited that campus. Now, here in chapter 19, God sees these men approaching David, who is someone God has a purpose for and a plan for. And so He says, no, not going to do that. And He subdues them by His Spirit. He overwhelms them by His Spirit. Verse 24, like I said, He strips off His clothes, it's just the outer garments, and laying face down in the dirt. Now, what in the world could that mean? Well, one, it means that there's some humbling going on. Two, it means that there is some surrendering going on. And I would add this feature that it means that there's some being real going on. I mean, you think about stripping things off to the real person. That's what's going on. It means what you are facing, beloved, no matter what it is not too big for God. David was facing enemies on all sides. but it wasn't too big for God. He never runs out of options as to what to do for you. Now, I can't tell you what option he will choose. It may be an option that you don't particularly like or appreciate. But this chapter is about the relentless hope for help that comes when we are following this living God. The relentless hope for help when we are following this God. This chapter could have been very short, beloved. I mean, verse 1 could have said this: Saul told everyone to kill David. Verse 2, God killed Saul. End of story. That could have been that. But sometimes the greatest evidence that God is with you is not that he rescues you from the storm or the struggle or the suffering. No, the greatest evidence is that you can still stand up in the midst of the storm and the struggle and the suffering. By the way, this story hints at only the kidnappers and the assassins and Saul were the ones laying down in the dirt with their clothes off. David is still standing. The storm is far from over, but he is still standing. David avoids the point of a spear. He avoids assassins surrounding his home. He avoids 3 sets of kidnappers and the king himself. And there will be 7 more years of this, but he is standing. God's deliverance is often in the midst of struggle and stress that will continue. Deliverance is not so much getting out of something, but being given the strength to go through something. It's not deliverance from the problem, but deliverance to something. Delivering to David, Jonathan, and Michael, and Samuel. Delivering what he needed in the midst of his problem. That's God's deliverance. Couldn't we say this is also the story of Jesus, the Son of God? That it wasn't the deliverance from the cross, but it was deliverance to be given the empowerment to go through the cross. Beloved, what kind of Saul is chasing you? Don't limit God and his ability to protect the purpose that he has for your life. Be relentless in your hope for his active presence in your storm. Because no matter what you are facing is not too big for God. Deliverance is not extraction from circumstances, but empowerment in them. And that empowerment can come in all kinds of shapes and forms. For David, it came in the form of Jonathan, it came in the form of Michael, and it came in the form of a place where people were encountering the Spirit of God. You know, beloved, maybe it's time for us to take off the outer garments, the outer mask, and just put ourselves in a place of humility, put ourselves in a place of being surrendered, and put ourselves in a place of being real. There is empowerment. There. God protects his purposes. If you align yourself with him, he will protect the purpose that he has for you. Well, beloved, this is chapter 19 for tonight. I hope that in this conversation about the chapter, there's been something here that spoke to you. And if it did speak to you, then my question would be, what are you going to do with it? I mean, now I know that sometimes when I ask that question, people have to say, well, gosh, I got to think about it. Okay, think about it, but tell me how are you going to think about it? What are you going to do to think about it? So anyway, I hope there's been something here that is a takeaway for you, and we'll look forward to sharing with you next week in chapter 20. I hope you have a great week and be blessed, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.